Welcome back to the Global Business Report. Nigeria's Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has said the African Continental Free Trade Agreement will make Nigeria an investment hub for Africa, spur growth in the economy, and increase export by 8%. According to him, despite signing the agreement late, the federal government is earnestly addressing issues that could hamper Nigeria's growth, adding that the agreement will enhance export of semi and fully finished goods. This was mentioned at the Financial Derivative Company stakeholders meeting, where industry heads gathered to discuss how to make the AfCFTA a catalyst for investment and GDP growth in Nigeria. And analyst Victor Okhai joins me in the studio to share his thoughts on this. Good to have you, Victor, and good morning.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, very good. Now, the President's Committee for the implementation of this trade agreement, what are your expectations there?
Well, first of all, I think it's a good idea to put together a committee. But I think that beyond just putting together a committee, there must be, they indicated that much, but how widely spread and relevant the committee will be is another issue. It's important that all sectors of the economy are adequately represented. I'll give you a small example. Right. There's a sector, for instance, the creative industries, that is usually not taken very seriously when you're talking business, and yet it can contribute greatly to, it has demonstrated capacity to, contribute greatly to GDP, for instance. Yeah. So I think that they should be on the table so that every industry is speaking, not just about manufacturing now, but even services, because we have quite a lot to offer. I mean, our human capital resources, in spite of our population and the percentage of, if you like, the educated to the rest of the population, in terms of share numbers, and what we have demonstrated, kind of capacity we've demonstrated in Europe and America, we do have quite a lot to offer the continent, especially in the area of services, financial services, and other services as well. So it's a good thing, and I think it will help us plan and see how we can take advantage, of the various opportunities in the various subsets of the continent. And see, initially we had fears about the implications for us. So it's good that we weren't left behind, and now that we've moved moving in, the thing to do now is to say, okay, we're on the table so we can talk. But before we do that, we have to be able to see, okay, no surprises. Where are the opportunities? Where are the threats? How do we go about them? How do we checkmate them? So we're on a good start.
Good. That means there has to be a constant engagement of stakeholders.
I agree completely.
To make sure,
yes, to ensure that it's not. It doesn't just end at that meeting. Yes.
Very good. Now, how would you assess Nigeria's preparedness for a continental free trade area agreement? Yes, we came in a little bit late, but in terms of us actually committing ourselves to this, so what do you make of it?
Well, I think that we had an opportunity at the ECOWAS level to see how it didn't quite work out as well as we would have liked, but I think the AU is a different kettle of fish altogether.
All right.
And there's greater commitment there, and we can talk to. I mean, with ECOWAS, we didn't want to be seen to be muzzling our way. That's going to be different with the AU. Yeah. So I think we've had some practice. We've learned our lessons from there. And these lessons we're going to take to the continental level. Yeah. And it's a huge market right now at our disposal, about, what, 1.2, 1.3 billion. With a market like that, obviously, we have to position ourselves to be able to move out there. People like Dangote, for instance, are already, moving across, and it's not just him. There are many other Nigerians as well.
Setting up businesses.
Setting up businesses. And many African countries are welcoming us as well. And they have said it, and I don't think they're lying about this when they say they'd rather have fellow Africans invest. Because, you see, whatever happens, we're on the continent. We would be able to talk to ourselves, better than when we're talking to the Chinese or the Americans or the English and all that. So,
and of course, the resources are within the continent
they are
itself.
within the continent.
So there's already a market for it.
Let me even say something that I think will work out now. Before now, you see a plundering of resources. Now, different countries have comparative advantages in different areas. Yes, some have, for crude, for instance, some may have refining capacity or may decide that that's what they want to do. Some may just have for, you know, how do I put it now, just drilling and all that. And so rather than go outside the continent, you see the gas pipelines, there are a few things we need to put, maybe we'll talk about that anyway, but now we'll be able to see within the continent where our cocoa, for instance, can be processed, where our oil can be processed and all of that, and then we can then sell to the outside world and then keep the money within the continent.
And talking about keeping the money in the continent and selling to the outside rather than the outside world, where is the role of China in all of this? They've made aggressive marketing and trade inroad into the continent. Virtually almost every segment of the continent's economies have an influence of Chinese presence there. So how do you think they will be able to tap into that free trade scenario among Africans?
China or other African countries?
China itself, okay, is still an influence. Even the U.S. at one point said, oh, this is another form of neo-colonialism, as it were, but you know, they've always been there.
No, I'll tell you what has happened up until now. And China has some influence in West Africa, but not that much.
Okay.
And that's because of the presence of countries like Nigeria, for instance. Of course, there are Chinese companies here.
Indeed.
But what has happened in places like Zambia and some of these other countries, for instance, like Copperbelt and all that, is that they are like in a helpless situation. You know, China comes, makes offers. Now, if they can get so much help, so the way Nigeria has helped other countries in West Africa, if they can reach out under this arrangement right now and get help from other African countries, what you get from your brother is always better than what you get from the Chinese, because we always know how it ends. You know, so I think that yes, China will have a role, but the role China is having is a vacuum that was created by the arrogance of the Americans and the Europeans, for instance, and now they're having to play catch up. The Chinese, up until recently, were like, they were a developing economy, like the rest of us.
Indeed.
And so we could speak at that level, we could understand. They had a better understanding of how things work here, and they didn't come with an air of superiority as the Americans and the others would come. And so it was easy for them to penetrate. You know, so, but as we move further, of course they are entrenched in the country, there's not that much you can do about it. But now we can say, no, enough of the exploitation. Because now you would have other Nigerians, other Africans, for instance, going in. If a Chinese company comes in and a Dangote comes in to do mining in Zambia, for instance, we can compete. You know, so a country may be weak, but we will now have equal chance of getting into those economies as China, for instance, and the other Western countries have had. And so we do have capacity. We have, the money as well. We have individuals who are companies, African companies that have capacity to be able to expand their business and indeed invest, you know, in many African countries.
Very good. Now, still talking about the modeling of this trade agreement, as it were. I know we took a cue probably from Europe and the experiences there, you know, the EU and all that. But I know I've asked this question before, but we didn't have enough time to deliberate on this. But the complexities of what is happening in Europe, did we take that into cognizance before applying into our own scenario, as it were?
Well, what I have seen and what I have heard from the EU is that, and you know, let me say this, what they're doing in Europe, frankly, is an African thing.
All right.
In philosophy, there's what is called ontological, or there's what is called African ontological solidarity. Going back to our roots, this is how we always were. Remember, we always had trade across the continent.
Indeed.
Trade had always existed. Whether using cowries as means of exchange, salt or whatever, there's a trans-African trade. It always existed. We never had any problem. We traded among ourselves until the Western powers came in.
Indeed.
Okay? And so while they were busy fighting themselves as savages in those days, we had great trade among ourselves. What we're simply doing now is going deep down, going back to our roots, rediscovering, you know, and what I said I had heard earlier on is when you hear African leaders talk, they're saying, my brother African country, they're talking about, they're seeing themselves as one, quite frankly. And so with that kind of spirit, they're going back to their roots and they're looking at the way we have always lived as a people. And they all agree as one that the division among us, the geographical divisions among us, were not necessarily of our making. They were forced on us. So we want to break down those barriers. So I see working here more than over there. I see, if you like, alternative dispute resolutions working better here than over there. We took what they, but you know, we had our own ways of arbitration in those days. I have seen the present crop of leaders in Africa right now. As I see them, they remind me of those that were like in the 60s, you know, during Kwame Nkrumah's time. People who saw one Africa. It was always a dream. Now, I think finally the dream is coming to pass. I don't think we're going to have a problem like the issue of you know, Brexit and all that. Those are the ego problems. It was never in their nature, you know. So, and they were more different. We were more. I think we have more that binds us than what binds the Europeans, the Eurozone, for instance.
All right, very good. Now, in 30 seconds, I know there's a lot of optimism towards this agreement, as it were, but where do you see it in the next 5 years?
Well, in the next 5 years, I see, frankly, I see a breakdown of, when I say breakdown now, boundaries.
All right.
I see Africans mixing. I see one Africa, quite frankly. A few things need to be done. You know, and put in place. We need to be able to make sure that our payment system works very well, so that our custom barriers are broken down, immigrations are freed. You wouldn't. I mean, I see an Africa that is more vibrant, an Africa that is more prosperous, and an Africa that finally takes ownership of its resources.
Very good. On that note, Victor Okhai, I'd like to thank you very much for your thoughts on the free trade agreement in Africa. It was a pleasure to have you.